Christmas dinner, my uncle said, "Women shouldn't vote." The mashed potatoes hit the floor before anyone processed what Uncle Lawrence had just said. 6 women sat frozen around Grandma Eleanor's dining table, forks halfway to mouths, while Lawrence leaned back with that smug grin he'd perfected over the past year of falling down internet rabbit holes. "I'm serious," he continued, scrolling through his phone. "Women vote with emotion instead of logic. That's why society's collapsing." My mother's knife was still pressed against her turkey, and I watched her knuckles go white. She'd just spent 3 months in D.C. lobbying Congress, but apparently Lawrence hadn't noticed. Or worse, he had noticed and picked this exact moment for maximum impact. Grandma Eleanor set down her fork with a soft clink that somehow silenced the room more effectively than a gunshot. At 89, she'd survived the Depression, World War II, and apparently infinite patience for male stupidity, but I could see that patience evaporating in real time. "Lawrence," she said in that deceptively sweet voice that meant someone was about to get destroyed, "remind me what you do for a living?" The trap was so obvious I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I'm between positions. The tech industry's pushing out qualified men for diversity hires." He was already defensive, already making excuses, and still hadn't realized he was standing in a minefield. Grandma smiled, and it was terrifying. "So, you're unemployed and living in Patricia's guest house. The guest house that your wife owns because she's been a successful real estate agent for 30 years? My cousin Nina had her phone out under the table, and when she caught my eye, she mouthed, "Recording this." Smart kid. Lawrence's wife Patricia had gone completely still, staring at her plate like she was doing complex mental mathematics. Their daughter Nina was a resident in emergency medicine, and I watched her face shift from shock to something colder as she realized her father had just suggested she shouldn't have basic rights. My sister Vivian laughed, but it wasn't kind. "Let me understand this correctly. You think the 6 women at this table, a congressional lobbyist, a surgeon, a federal judge, a biochemistry PhD, a real estate mogul, and the founder of a pharmaceutical company, are too emotional to vote? While you, currently unemployed and living off your wife, are the rational one?" She counted us off on her fingers, and Lawrence's face went pale. That's when Aunt Helena, the federal judge who rarely spoke at family gatherings, set down her napkin and fixed Lawrence with a look that probably made lawyers cry in her courtroom. "Lawrence, I've listened to your increasingly problematic opinions for 3 years because Patricia asked us to be patient. But you just stated in front of witnesses that half the population shouldn't have democratic rights. That crosses every line." Her voice was measured, judicial, and somehow more terrifying than screaming. Lawrence tried to backtrack with that classic move of saying something horrific and then claiming misunderstanding when consequences appeared. "I didn't mean it like that. There's scientific evidence about hormones and decision-making." Grandma Eleanor cut him off with a hand wave that carried the weight of 89 years of taking exactly zero shit from anyone. "I was born in 1935. I heard the same arguments you're making now, just with different words." She stood up, all 4 feet 11 inches, radiating more authority than Lawrence could dream of possessing. "I started my pharmaceutical company in 1962, when banks wouldn't give women business loans without male co-signers. That company now employs 200 people and generates $30 million annually." Grandma walked around the table slowly, and everyone watched like she was delivering a verdict. "The blood pressure medication you take every morning? My lab created it. Your cholesterol treatment? Mine. The antidepressant you think nobody knows about? My team developed it 15 years ago." Lawrence went completely white. Patricia was staring at her mother-in-law with an expression I couldn't read, but it was shifting towards something harder by the second. "So when you sit at my table, eating food purchased with money earned by women, in a house owned by a woman, taking medications developed by women, and suggest women shouldn't vote," Grandma paused for effect, "I have to wonder what exactly you think would happen if we'd listened to men like you. You'd probably be dead from untreated hypertension." My mother spoke up, and her voice had shifted from cold to something resembling pity, which was somehow worse. "Lawrence, men who are secure in their worth don't need to diminish women to feel important. What you're describing isn't philosophy. It's insecurity dressed up as intellectualism." Vivian added clinical precision like she was diagnosing a patient. "You're a textbook case of digital extremism pipeline. I literally wrote my dissertation on this." Lawrence slammed his hand on the table, making china rattle. "So I'm not allowed to have different opinions? I have to accept liberal propaganda?" Nina finally spoke, her voice cracking but steady. "Dad, I watched you change this past year. You lost your job and found online communities that told you it wasn't your fault, that you're a victim of feminist agendas." Tears were streaming down her face, but she kept her phone recording. "You used to be proud of me for medical school. Now you question if I'm actually qualified. You forgot my birthday last month because you were arguing on Reddit about women in the workplace." Patricia's head snapped up at that. "You forgot Nina's birthday?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "I was working a double shift that week, and you told me you'd handle it. You said you took her to dinner." Lawrence's face cycled through emotions before landing on rage. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're all turning on me for having an honest conversation." He stood up abruptly. "I don't need any of you. There are communities of men who understand what I'm going through." Grandma Eleanor's voice stopped him cold. "Lawrence, leave my house. Now, or I call the police." The room went silent except for the antique clock ticking in the hallway. Lawrence looked around the table, clearly expecting someone to defend him, but found only cold stares. Even Patricia was nodding slowly. "You're going to regret this," Lawrence said, voice pitched between threat and whine. "When society collapses because men have been neutered," Vivian interrupted, "the only thing collapsing is your marriage. Society's actually doing great. Countries with greater gender equality have stronger economies, but I'm sure Reddit knows better than peer-reviewed research. The door slammed hard enough to rattle ornaments, and we sat in heavy silence until Nina's shaking voice broke it. I've been recording his statements for months, since he told me women who pursue careers over motherhood are biologically defective. She looked at her mother. Mom, I have hours of footage. I kept thinking maybe if I showed him how he sounded, he'd realize. But when I tried, he accused me of betraying him. Patricia pulled out her phone with trembling hands. He's already posted about tonight. Listen, tried to have honest conversation about biological differences. Got attacked by a room full of feminists. This is what happens when men speak truth. She looked sick. He's made himself a martyr. Nina leaned over to read. Oh God, the responses. They're telling him to cut contact with us, that we're toxic. Someone just linked him to a lawyer who specializes in helping men fight feminist divorce courts. Vivian opened her laptop. This is the final stage of radicalization. Complete isolation from moderating influences. Once someone reaches this point, intervention is nearly impossible. She pulled up slides from her dissertation. He's following the pattern perfectly. Job loss, online communities validating his resentment, gradual absorption of extreme positions until he can tell his daughter she shouldn't have rights. Patricia made a decision I could see crystallizing in real time. I'm calling a locksmith right now. He's been in the guest house because we were taking a break, but after tonight, that's done. Her voice was steady even as tears started. 26 years, and he turned into someone who could look at our daughter and think she shouldn't vote. Aunt Helena pulled out her phone. I'm giving you my divorce attorney's number. She specializes in radicalization cases. And document everything. His statements tonight, witnessed by 7 people, will matter in court. The evening revealed more horrors as we talked. Nina shared how Lawrence told her to freeze her eggs because at 24 she should prioritize motherhood over trauma surgery specialization. Patricia discovered he'd been secretly draining their savings. $30,000 donated to men's rights organizations and cryptocurrency schemes from his online communities. My mother explained the radicalization pipeline with frightening clarity. These communities prey on legitimate struggles like job loss, redirect that pain toward blaming women and minorities, gradually escalate beliefs until violence seems justified. Then Grandma Eleanor dropped her own bombshell. My husband went through this in 1973. Different medium, same pattern. He joined a group of men who convinced him women working was destroying families. Came home and told me to quit my job, submit to his authority. Everyone stared. What happened? Patricia asked, hope and dread mixing in her voice. I took the kids and left for 6 months. He lasted 2 weeks before calling my sister, begging me to come back. Couldn't manage the household, burned every meal. Kids were feral. Grandma smiled grimly. When I returned, things were equal. He'd learned partnership isn't hierarchy. She looked at Patricia seriously. But that was different. He was fundamentally good, temporarily lost. Lawrence has been heading here for months, and tonight shows he's committed. Patricia nodded, scrolling through more of Lawrence's posts. He's already building his victim narrative with hundreds of comments validating him. The next hours were spent planning. Security concerns, financial protections, restraining orders. Vivian warned that these communities sometimes encourage dramatic retaliation. Be prepared for harassment, financial sabotage, attempts to turn people against you. 2 days later, Patricia filed for divorce. Lawrence responded with a 5,000-word manifesto including her full name and business information, encouraging his community to leave reviews warning about her anti-male bias. Within hours, her business accounts flooded with fake 1-star reviews from people who'd never met her. She hired reputation management, documented everything, fought back legally. The divorce proceedings revealed the full financial devastation, $30,000 gone to online personalities and crypto scams. The judge, briefed by Aunt Helena about the extremism context, gave Patricia everything: house, business, assets, with Lawrence required to pay back what he'd stolen. Nina cut contact after receiving a lengthy email about being brainwashed by feminist medical institutions and how trauma surgery was unfeminine and unnatural. She forwarded it to her therapist, working through grief of losing a parent to ideology. 3 months post-divorce, Lawrence showed up at Grandma's house at 2 a.m., breaking windows and screaming about feminist tyranny until police arrived. His online communities immediately framed him as a political prisoner, started fundraisers, doxed family members, including Nina's hospital address. Men from his community showed up at her workplace demanding to discuss family values and proper gender roles. Hospital security increased. Nina filed restraining orders, sued harassers, which only intensified the online rage. They made her their ultimate villain. Daughter who betrayed her father, career woman rejecting femininity, person using legal systems to silence men. The harassment lasted months in waves whenever Lawrence posted updates. Grandma Eleanor passed away 18 months later, surrounded by family but explicitly excluding Lawrence due to arrest records and restraining orders. At the funeral, Patricia eulogized strength and refusing limitations. Nina spoke about medications saving lives, including my father's, ironically, while he argued their creator shouldn't vote. Lawrence attempted to crash the funeral with 2 online community members, but Aunt Helena had stationed off-duty police officers who turned them away. Lawrence live-streamed it as persecution evidence, gaining thousands of views from men who saw themselves in his martyrdom. 3 years post-dinner, Patricia remarried Robert, a retired teacher who'd taught girls STEM programs and lost his own wife to similar radicalization. They bonded over watching spouses transform into strangers through online extremism. At their small wedding, Nina toasted second chances and partners who celebrate success, rather than resent it. Vivian's published dissertation gained academic attention, leading to conference speaking, consulting with platforms addressing algorithmic extremism, training therapists in deprogramming techniques. The tragedy is men start from legitimate grievances but find radicalization instead of actual help. Lawrence descended into increasingly fringe spaces, banned from mainstream platforms, posting paranoid conspiracies about feminist government agents and family members being deep state replacements. Nina checked his profiles occasionally, self-harm her therapist addressed. I keep hoping to see he's getting better, that my father's still in there. But every post confirms he's gone. My mother's advocacy organization created educational materials about recognizing family radicalization, hosting webinars attended by thousands. Signs are usually there early: increased online time, growing resentment, conspiracy thinking, isolation, financial changes like extremist donations. They included interviews with people who'd successfully left these communities, though emphasized how rare successful deprogramming was, without major personal crisis forcing worldview shift. 5 years later at a family gathering, we toasted Grandma Eleanor's memory and reflected on change. Patricia and Robert happy in genuine partnership. Nina teaching trauma surgery, training next generation including many young women. Aunt Helena retired but consulting on extremism in legal contexts. Vivian writing a book expanding her research. My mother promoted to national leadership. Everyone moved forward, built lives proving Lawrence wrong simply by existing successfully. Do you think about what would have happened if we'd just let it go that night? I asked Patricia during a quiet moment. If we'd changed the subject? She considered. Maybe the marriage limps along longer. Maybe Nina internalizes more toxic beliefs. Maybe I make excuses for years. She paused. But that night needed to happen. Grandma forcing confrontation, all of us refusing to let his statement stand, Nina recording everything. It forced painful but necessary clarity. Lawrence existed somewhere in digital underground, still convinced of his righteousness while we built lives proving his ideology hollow. My daughter asked once what happened to her great-great-uncle Lawrence. I thought about explaining radicalization to a 10-year-old. He believed things that weren't true. When people who loved him tried to help him see reality, he chose beliefs over family. She processed this seriously. That's sad. It is, I agreed. But it's a reminder that beliefs have consequences. Sometimes those consequences mean losing everything that mattered while clinging to ideology promising belonging but delivering isolation. Years passed and Lawrence became cautionary tale, the family story warning about online radicalization dangers. Remember Uncle Lawrence? Someone would say, discussing conspiracy theories or extremism. The story taught new generations about recognizing warning signs and early intervention. 7 years post-dinner, Patricia raised her glass at Christmas. To Grandma Eleanor, who taught us speaking truth matters more than keeping peace, that some statements can't go unchallenged, and that women who wait for permission to exist fully will wait forever. We clinked glasses. All women who voted, worked, existed in ways Lawrence claimed unnatural and destructive. His absence was noticeable but not mourned. Some losses are necessary. Some relationships can't survive reality contact. And sometimes maintaining family peace costs too much when it requires accepting your own diminishment. The meal continued with laughter, comfortable chaos of family gathering. No one asked permission to speak, have opinions, exist fully. Normal conversation among equals, the kind Lawrence tried to prevent. But we'd refused his vision, rejected his ideology, built something better in its absence. The final toast came from Robert. To the women at this table who fought for their rights, built successful lives, and refused limits imposed by threatened men. And to men who support them, not because we're special, but because treating women as equals is baseline human decency. As I looked around at these strong, autonomous women, I thought about Lawrence in his digital isolation, convinced he was right while the world moved on. Some people choose ideology over reality, and the price is watching from outside while life continues among those who refuse to be diminished. The conversation flowed to Nina's research presentation, Vivian's book deal, Patricia's new office. We'd built lives that proved his ideology hollow. Success wasn't revenge, but it was something. Proof that his world where women accepted diminished roles was dying despite his community's best resurrection efforts. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.